My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. In today's Gospel, we find a phrase that we find a couple of times in the Gospel, which is the phrase that Jesus, you came into the world. I, the light, have come into the world. But we could ask ourselves in this time of prayer, Jesus, what world was that you came into? Because we often talk about different kinds of worlds. We talk about the world of politics, or the world of high finance, or the world of Hollywood celebrities. Normally it's something very extraordinary. But the world you came into, the world that you wanted to enter, wasn't any of those kind of worlds. Rather, it was the world of a humble family trying to make ends meet from week to week, of playing games with the children on your street, of watching your mother baking bread at the beginning of the day, of helping your father produce perhaps a lovely piece of furniture. It was a world of exciting annual pilgrimages to Jerusalem, which must have been a real highlight for you, Lord. It was a world of wedding feasts and funerals, of walks in the hills overlooking the Lake of Galilee, and maybe when St. Joseph was alive, that was something you did together with him quite often, we can imagine. But also, Jesus, you never actually say that you left the world. You never even say that you will leave the world. Rather, you say the exact opposite. You say, I am with you always, till the end of the age. In other words, you are always part of this world. You are part of my world, if I want you to be. Certainly you want to be an integral part of my humble little world. And the more ordinary the world of my life, the more ordinary it is, the better. Better if your world, my world, is one of extraordinary miracles, or extraordinary fasts, anything extraordinary. Because Jesus, we see that you are much more at home in an ordinary, everyday life. And I say this because there is something that some saints have called the temptation of the extraordinary. That we get up in the morning and we go through a very ordinary day and we don't bilocate, and there's no faint fragrance of celestial roses, there's no dramatic miracles, it's a very ordinary life that we live, and we kind of think therefore, well, sanctity and being very close to Jesus isn't part of my life. Well, the opposite is true, because you, Lord, want to be part of an ordinary world. Now we can ask ourselves, we can ask Jesus in this time of prayer, Lord, how can I ensure that you are really part of my world? And I can imagine Jesus replying to you, to me, Jesus saying, I won't come in unless you invite me in. I don't barge into anybody's world. I never have. I never will do. I always wait for an invitation. And so it's up to you, it's up to me, to invite Jesus into your world, into your ordinary world. Make sure that he comes into your world every day. So for example, the beginning of the day, a very simple thing we do, the very first thing we can do, that little morning offering, where in one way or another, there's any number of different formulas, but in one way or another we sing to you, Jesus, Jesus, I'm going to live another ordinary day, but I want you to live it with me. be part of my world. In the morning, perhaps on the way to work, pop into the church, Mass if we have time, but even just popping in. St. Josemaria told a nice story about when he was a young priest in Madrid, hearing confessions. He would hear confessions in the morning time, before, as people were heading off to work, they might get confession. And he heard this strange noise at the back of the church, a kind of clanging sound, and then the door of the church swinging open, and the clanging got a bit louder, and then the door of the church would shut, and the clanging would disappear. And his curiosity was piqued by this. And so one morning when the clanging started, he didn't have anybody in the confession box, so he went out to see what was happening. And what he saw was a milkman coming in with his milk pails. And St. Josemaria went over to greet the milkman, and he said, I was very curious about the noise. And the guy said, well, what I do is I'm beginning my round, my milk round now in the morning. And as I'm beginning, I pop into the church, and I just open the door, and I pop in, and I just say, good morning, Jesus, it's John the milkman. And he'd go off again. And St. Josemaria was very, very impressed by that. It was so simple, so ordinary. This man beginning his milk rounds in the morning, but he wanted to begin his day, saying hello to Jesus. Good morning, Jesus. And we could see that as a way that we would have of doing something similar, and in saying to Jesus, Jesus, I'm beginning a very ordinary day, probably the same as yesterday, probably won't be very different tomorrow, but I want you to be part of this day. I want you to be part of my world, because that is why you came into the world, to be part of ordinary lives, my life. Tell him that you love him. A very simple thing that we can do. Recently, I was on retreat, and there was a number of men that I didn't know. One of them was an elderly man who had a kind of condition where maybe he was very deaf, I don't know, but he didn't realize that when he was speaking under his breath, it wasn't really under his breath at all. It was quite audible, and I wasn't kind of eavesdropping, so I could hear him. And I heard him saying a number of times, at breakfast, Jesus, I love you. And I was very struck. This man having his breakfast with his cornflakes, and what he thought was quietly, talked to himself, but he was saying over his cornflakes, Jesus, I love you. What an invitation. What an invitation to Jesus to be part of my ordinary day. The little successes of the day. Something goes really well. Thank Jesus. Thank you, Lord, for how that went. Ask him for more help if it doesn't go so well. These are very, very ordinary things. Offer him the little jobs that we have in hand. A lot of people have the custom of putting a little crucifix on their table beside them as they work. And again, well, it's just an ordinary day, but Jesus is there, as it were, with us at our table. We're working together on this task. You, Lord, are part of my world. And then when it comes to the end of the day and we've lived our day, we can finish the day again, just as it were, saying goodnight to Jesus, saying, well, we have lived this very ordinary day together. You have been part of this day, an integral part of this day, Lord. And tomorrow we'll do the same, another ordinary day. And you are delighted. And each day, the day which seems so ordinary is in fact a little bit extraordinary, in fact, because we have Christ with us through the course of the day. We think of Our Lady in this month of May, and also Saint Joseph, all those hundreds and hundreds of ordinary days that they spent together, where Jesus was literally, really, very much at home. Jesus, I want you to be at home in my world, in my life. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.